Hey class, my name is Sam Eldridge. I'm responsible for the Module 5 video, and I'm actually shooting this video in my truck because I'm here on vacation at Lake Eufaula in Alabama. We're fishing, but I just want to get this video out to you as quick as I can. The article that I wrote my theological assessment on for this module was the article by George Hunsberger, and the title of the article is Reflections for a Conversation on Theology and Congregational Life. I highly recommend this article. The article stood out to me because I pastor two small churches in Northeast Alabama. Bothwell United Methodist, we average about 10, and Sandrock United Methodist, we average about 20 to 30. And some of the theological conversations that you have in the small church, small local church, is interesting. And sometimes having theological conversations is tough, especially now that I'm especially going to seminary and then going to the small church. But perhaps it's true with a medium size or a bigger church also, that you got to be careful not to be too academic in your theological talk. And I think some of the redundancies that we use really speaks to the times that we're in. For example, public theology. We talked about earlier in this class on how that's kind of redundant. Missional church. Of course, the church should have a mission. A theological church. Of course, the church should be about theology. But it's interesting that we have to use these terms like we do because it kind of speaks to the times that we're in. It speaks to how these have actually become disconnected, and how maybe the theological church is not as much theological as it's perhaps more like a club. Maybe it's more political. I don't know. But it definitely speaks to where we're at. But just a few quick things that I wanted to share that stood out to me in this article. This question right here, it says, what counts as theology? And that is an interesting question. What counts as theology? Because especially within the local church, everybody has a theology, even though they may not like the word theology and they think it's academic term and not used or not to be used for them. Everybody has their own theology. And I really like this follow-up question that this article asks. What counts as theology is likely to be a question about whose theology counts. And I thought that was key. Like, okay, whose theology within the church counts? Because everybody within that church, believers anyways, have their own gospel. They have their own unique view. They have some things that they cling to, that they are attracted to, part of the gospel. And I think that's interesting. Some maybe focus more on Jesus' ministry or his life. Some focus maybe more on the cross. Some focus more on that, the justifying grace. Some focus more on, when the Holy Spirit came and that sanctifying grace. I feel like we all have that piece, of the gospel that's unique, that we kind of cling to, that really, that we just highlight. But of course, as the church, we are to expand, to learn more and more about the mystery of the gospel, because it is a mystery. It is indeed a mystery. And this question about whose theology counts is so important. And this is what I struggled with. At first, I was tempted to say, well, everybody's theology counts, because everybody is a different level of their walk with Jesus. Everybody is at that at a certain level. But whose theology counts within the church as it relates to conversation, as it relates to growing? Whose theology counts? Whose theology should be heard? Whose theology should be the guiding voice? And what I liked about this article, it was not necessarily the pastor. It was the pastor, and the pastor should be the resident theologian, right? But it was those that were skilled in the daily routine practices of faith. That's what the article highlights. Those that are skilled in the daily practices of their faith. In other words, those that practice what they preach. Those that live this life day in and day out and not just on Sunday. Their theology counts. At my church, or the church that I serve, um, we have a lady that is just she has such a rich, deep prayer life that I'm challenged by it and I'm encouraged by it at the same time. When she talks to me about her prayer life and how intimate that time with her and God is, that I'm like, man, I'm your pastor, but you were talking to me about things that are just like I've never experienced. I've never even really seen before. And she is actually talking and teaching me theology when she does that, not because of her, not necessarily because that she has a degree or she's taken a class, but because she practices it and she can share it. So church, I mean, I'm used to shooting videos and saying church. So class, hey, I just definitely want y'all to check out Reflections for a Conversation on Theology and Congregational Life. Let me know what you think. What stands out to you in this article? There's so much. And let me ask y'all, how does talking about theology within your context go? Um, for me, I try not to be too academic. I try to, not use big words to. There's the temptation to use big words and be like, look at what I know, but really keep it at the ground level, but also, still challenge, still use some theological terms, right, and teach, but to keep it personal, but most importantly, to practice it. Yes, to practice it. So I'm interested in hearing y'all's thoughts about it. It's a great article, but y'all have a great week, and I think I'm gonna go back fishing. See you guys.